Now here's another Gold Derby exclusive. Tom O'Neill with our forums moderator, Chris Boomer Beachum, on a video conference call, and we're talking Emmys. The season isn't officially begun yet, Chris. Eligibility period ends May 31st. But let's kind of take a view from the mountaintop at this point, okay?
Sure. It feels like we're entering the new millennium again. I've never done a video chat before.
Well,
you're in New York, and I'm in the deep South here.
Yeah. We're going to start bringing in a lot more Derbyites and envelopers into this process as we go on through this season. But let's start with comedy series, because I think there's some interesting developments there. Last year, our nominees for Best Comedy Series were 30 Rock, Office, Entourage, Curb Your Enthusiasm, 2.5 Men. We know Curb won't be back. Among the new crop of contenders is, I think the fascinating race to watch is what will happen with Parks and Recreation with Amy Poehler. Because if this rallies, and we have to remember that the early word on this is that the pilot didn't test well with screening audiences. Now, they've had a lot of time to work on that and fix it. Let's assume they'll get it right. Very often, new shows struggle like this out of the box. But let's assume it's as good as we hope it will be. That's going to pit the two Saturday Night Live divas together.
And Best Friends.
Yes, and Best Friends. Of course, we're talking about Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. In that claw fest, who do you think comes out on top?
I would not put money on anybody but Tina Fey at this point, who has had a better year than her. I want to see some of these episodes with Amy Poehler, but just in terms of the year she's had, Tina Fey is really on top of the entertainment world right now. So I wouldn't put any money away from her.
Mm-hmm. Now, we have this wild card with Toni Collette coming in with the Showtime show United States of Tara. And you and I know, as veteran awards watchers, Chris, that the voters at the Emmys, just like at the Oscars, are suckers for split personalities. Now, in
split personalities? Yeah, and get a former Oscar nominee, too. I mean, that's gonna be a real contender, I think, in this category.
I think it is. She may even be the person to beat, because I think the psychology of the voter in this case is, hey, if I'm seeing 5 or 6 performances in one episode here or in one series, I'm getting 5 or 6 votes for the price of one. Now look back through Emmy history. Right. We've had upsets. Sally Field pulled off an upset in the TV movie category years ago for portraying Sybil. That was 16 personalities. And one of the biggest upsets ever is when Lindsay Wagner won Best Drama Actress for Bionic Woman, and it was an episode she submitted to the Emmy jury where she portrayed good and bad personas of herself.
Right. Oh, and think of daytime dramas with all the multiple personalities there, and how many of those have won daytime Emmys.
I know. So if I were Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, I'd be taking out my claws against Toni Collette right now.
Well, and you wonder if voters that like a Saturday Night Live style humor, if there might be a little bit of vote splitting there too. If Tina and Amy are against each other, if somebody likes both, some of those will go one way and some of those will go the other. So right. You never know how those things will play out either.
Let's talk about Family Guy. This is interesting. Back in the 1990s, The Simpsons tried moving over from animation to comedy. They did not succeed. They moved back to animation. Family Guy has been nominated a few times for Best Animated Program, has not won. And last year they tried the ploy of moving over to comedy series, but they did it with a safety cushion. They were able to remain in the animated program category because there's a quirk of voting there where a show, if it has a standalone special, can still compete there. So they put their Family Guy special into the animated program, competed against South Park and Simpsons, and then they moved the series over to Best Comedy Series, and they almost got in. They had a top 10 runoff last year. We know Family Guy made the top 10. This year, it didn't get nominated, of course, but this year there are going to be 6 or 7 nominees instead of the usual 5. So, can it get in?
It could. Last year when we started hearing some of the reports from the panel sessions, remember, that was the one everybody was talking about. That was the one that had everybody apparently in these auditorium rooms laughing out loud. So we all thought it had a possibility last year.
But you have to kind of deconstruct the voting in the minds of the voters last year. We know that there's a bias against animation for the Oscars, for the Emmys, the rest of it. At what point did that bias stop? If the Family Guy episode was that good, and it was last year, then what stopped it from getting nominated? Was it the bias right at that moment where they check off their ballot and they think to themselves, well, that was really good, but I can't vote for animation. That's not real TV. Or, in other words, then it stopped at making that last 5, but that bias didn't enter into their thinking when they were checking off the popular ballot, which determined the top 10?
Yeah, if it was at the bottom of that top 10, let's say it was 9th or 10th, it would have had to, because it was a 50-50 voting, it would have had to have finished first or second on the ballot tabulations of the actual episode watching to make it into a nominee status. So it may have been that it was just 9th or 10th. But I think what you said is also true. Sometimes we laugh at things, but we're almost guilty about laughing at them, whatever it may be. If it's lowbrow kind of humor, if it's an Adam Sandler comedy, you might enjoy it for the moment, but do you really want to award it with something? You just never know what goes through a voter's mind. But this year, as you've already reported, strictly going with a top 6, maybe top 7 popular vote, episodes will have nothing to do with getting nominated this time.
Yeah, there's a purely popular vote. In a way, that should make our jobs easier as prognosticators. But the Emmy voting has changed so radically year to year in recent years that it's hard to use the recent past as a gauge to what might happen in the future.
Well, and this year, we're going to talk about drama in a moment, but comedy is particularly hard. How many are there 6 or 7 quality comedies on the air right now that would be normal Emmy-type contenders? It's a very small pool of shows that you would actually consider as possible Emmy nominees. You've got the 4 returning from last year that would seem to be fairly safe, but then what other 2 are you going to put in there with it?
Mm-hmm. I know. We've had
from a popular standpoint.
Right. We've had some promising new shows like Better Off Ted. I think that's kind of sophisticated and funny, but it's so new, I'm not sure it's on their radar yet. I don't know what the answer to that is. Can Ugly Betty come back, maybe?
Ugly Betty could come back. There could be a sort of sympathy vote for Pushing Daisies, which got canceled, but was certainly an incredible show and made it into the top 10 on popular vote last year. A show I would love to see nominated, which I think is really right there in that top 2 or 3, right with the Office and 30 Rock, in terms of laugh out loud humor and consistent comedy is The Big Bang Theory. I would love to see that nominated. The same producers that produced 2.5 Men, so they have a shot there really of getting 2 shows in, along with the show that they already had in there. And then you mentioned United States of Tara earlier and Parks and Recreation. So, but once you get beyond those, I think we've named about every possible comedy that really has a decent shot. Well, a lot of people do love Flights of the Conchord, which did come back here in the spring for HBO. So I think don't write that one completely off. That is one of those cult hits that if it has just enough, and it made it the top 10 runoff last year, remember. If it has just enough cult followers that think of that as their favorite show overall, there's no other show like it, it could make it in.
Mm-hmm. It really could. Not my cup of tea. I don't quite understand that show, but Emmy voters have a different taste than me, and that's probably a good thing.
Well, comedies are on the downside right now. Everything's cyclical, so I'm sure that there'll be a year coming up 2, 3, 4 years down the road where comedies really make a comeback. But the dramas, now that's where the field is flooded. I mean, there's 30 or 40 dramas out there that at least are in the discussion, and that's going to be a lot more difficult to figure out which 6 or 7 make it in there, I think.
Okay, we're going to discuss those in a minute. Meantime, thanks, Chris.
Sure. Thank you, Tom.